I'm very excited that throughout this season on the Brady Quinn Football Show featuring Ryan Wilson with Will Brinson, that we're going to do some draft coverage. I hope people like it because it's a good way. I get a head start on like instead of trying to learn about I watch a ton of college football and I know a lot of college football
Get
players.
to the point, Brinson. You're bloviating right now.
I'm excited that I get to talk with two great college football minds, Brady Quinn, Ryan Wilson, about some stud college football players. So I have a question for you, Brady. Chase Young, by the way, 10-1 to be the first overall pick. Interesting. I would bet on that right now because if the Bengals are the worst team in football and they like Ryan Finley, maybe they'll draft Chase Young first overall. Look, it probably won't happen. I get it. Joe Burrow. This is via an offshore, but Tua is minus 150. Burrow plus 250. Justin Herbert plus 6-1 from 8-1, and then Chase Young, 10-1, and Jerry Jeudy 30-1. A, Brady, is there a chance that Chase Young is the first overall pick? And B, is there a chance he wins the Heisman?
Well, let's first talk to Ryan, okay, because this is his mock draft. I want Ryan to be able to put it up because I'll just answer this by saying,
oh, you actually have Chase Young.
Chase Young is the top overall prospect. He's clean as it gets. He's a great kid. He's ridiculous against in his pass rush. He's also good against the run. There's the efforts there, all that stuff. He is, as far as any team that's looking to try to pick a guy and not miss, it would be Chase Young. Unfortunately, you've got a lot of quarterbacks who I think are going to be taken somewhere in the top 2-3 picks. So for that reason, there's a chance that the Bengals could take him, but they'd trade out of the pick with someone who's willing to trade up to get a Tua Tagovailoa or a Joe Burrow out of LSU or Justin Herbert or Jacob Eason, although I don't think Eason would be taken that high. But one of those three names I mentioned, I think you got some very opinions on some of those guys. So for that reason, I think it's unlikely he'll go number one overall. But to Ryan Wilson's mock draft, and to his credit, he's definitely the number one overall prospect, and it's worth talking about and discussing.
Yeah, I'll say this. Last week, the Bengals also had the first overall pick because they're somehow the worst team in football, and I had them taking Joe Burrow, and we talked about that. So I wanted to mix it up a little bit based on what Chase Young's done this season, based on what he did against Wisconsin last week. He absolutely went off. And you sort of hit on it, Brinson. What if they like Ryan Finley and they want to move on with him? That's fine. They also have Andy Dalton under contract for another year if they want to unbench him. But I feel like, we talked about with the Bosas, you can't go wrong if you take him first overall. And then you look at the rest of this draft. For the first time, I think in this weekly mock draft I've been doing since early September, I have the Dolphins taking Joe Burrow instead of Tua. Tua's out with the ankle injury, had surgery on the other ankle, different from last year. And Joe Burrow continues to play at an extremely high level. He had his worst game of the season in quotes against Auburn, and he still played unbelievably well. He had one mistake, was the interception. He threw it down to the 2-yard line. There are worse interceptions you can make. He seems to make all the right decisions with the ball. He's not afraid to throw it underneath, and he is also sneakily athletic. Something changed here in the top 10. I had CeeDee Lamb going ahead of Jerry Jeudy, which I haven't done before. I absolutely love CeeDee Lamb. You look at him, he looks skinny. He might be one of the strongest wide receivers pound for pound in terms of yak monster guy. He catches the ball, and he's breaking tackles left to right. And Brady, what do you think about Tua slipping to 7? And would you, as John Elway, who loves quarterbacks, would you think about taking him there, even though you took Drew Lock last year? We've yet to see Drew Lock play.
Yeah, I mean, it will depend on how the rest of the season goes. I mean, Brandon Allen's starting this week, but they'll eventually transition to Drew Lock once he's ready. I mean, Brett Rippon's there too. Maybe he gets some burn time, but you got to see what you have in Drew Lock. I don't know. I mean, a year into it, it's quick to all of a sudden give up on Drew Lock. However, if you feel like he's going to be the guy and he falls to you and maybe too tough to pass up on, there's a lot of things in question, though. Is John Elway even making that decision? Is Vic Fangio even there? I mean, you don't know how the rest of the season is going to play out. So it's too hard right now for me to be able to answer that question. I think the better question is at least in my mock draft, how I look at these two, and I think you're on agreement with me. I'd have Burrow as the number one guy right now. I think you look at what he's doing in LSU, running an NFL-style system. I think you could see a little bit of that with Tua, but the injury concerns are real. I mean, he's already had this procedure done on the other leg. Now he's getting it for the second year in a row on his opposite leg. So is he going to be injury-prone? Does he know how to get down and protect himself? Those are all kind of questions I have moving forward. I think I just want to go back to one thing about Chase Young. It's interesting because if you think about the Bengals, and let's say they like Ryan Finley, or maybe they're even on the fence about it and they have a chance to take one of the top quarterbacks. I mean, what would do more for that organization? An Ohio State player who potentially could be a finalist for the Heisman, who you know is going to come in right away and help you defensively. And when you think about what Nick Bosa's done this year in San Francisco, maybe it's a copycat league. Maybe it's a route that they would entertain going potentially with the number 1 overall pick, much like the Cleveland Browns did with a guy like Myles Garrett, and who's we've just talked about as being up for Defensive Player of the Year, along with another name we considered, Nick Bosa. So maybe that would make a lot of sense for the Bengals, just because where they're at. And I think when you look at some of the other pieces they have up front, maybe he would fit in with that defense, and they need just as much help there as I think they do at the quarterback spot. Like, you could take Ryan Finn, or you could take another quarterback. The problem is that offensive line's bad, and unless they get more help there in free agency and potentially in other rounds, I'm not sure it's going to make a difference who your quarterback is.
I like Chase Young. I would take Chase Young. That's what I'm saying. I'm worried these quarterbacks. Quarterbacks scare me a little bit. That's all I'm saying.